Huzzah. Okay, we are recording. Yeah. All right, so here we are. We have covered these topics so far: voicing gratitude, taking the long view, choosing well, accepting responsibility, and welcoming the future. That's a lot of ground. That's a lot to keep us busy. Huh? So we are getting ready to dig in here for this evening. Let me make sure I got this. Okay. Okay. So we're going to come back to this list a little later. But for openers, and usually the icebreakers are easy, but you've been at this for 6 weeks now, so you get a hard one to start with. Where is God to be found when we suffer? And this is not a debate. So we're not going to argue the points, but a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about how this might work. So invite all possible options. We don't really know the answer, so it's an answer of faith. So no arguing. But what do you think?
I think sometimes it's the people in the congregation that come forth and or just listen to you or come forth and help you with something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the presence of other believers, perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Where else might God be? Say a little more.
Might be trying to point us in the right direction.
Okay. Okay. So it might be coming from the hand of God to redirect us. That's possible. Okay. Where else might God be?
He's there when we pray to him, so he's there in prayer. Yes. We're supposed to call him good times and bad. So.
Okay.
Always there. Always.
Yeah. Okay. So he is present. God is present. Anybody think that there are times when God is not?
I think God will always be found if we ask for him, but there's a lot of times he leaves us up to our own devices too, because we need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not reaching out to him and saying, okay, let's see how you do. A lot to deal with.
Yeah. Okay.
Know that in my personal life.
Sure.
I would say God is always there, of course. But when you say the word suffer, you almost have to kind of put that in perspective. Just what I would say is suffering is somebody else. There's varying levels of suffering.
Okay.
So maybe that's, I don't know, putting certain things first. And
I always think about Job
Mm-hmm.
and how God was still there with Job. He's suffering. And I always think sometimes when people are going through something where they're suffering, God's actually closer to them than not.
Okay. Yeah. So
It's almost like kind of a blessing to be suffering. I don't know.
that's a fine line to walk. Yeah.
This year of suffering with grief has brought me closer to God.
Yeah. So blessing can come from it.
But you have to have a really strong foundation, because if you're not, when you're going through suffering, then things can fall apart.
They can. They can. So, yeah. And sometimes Richard Rohr talks about how in life we move from order, which is having that sure foundation, to disorder, where everything falls apart, including that foundation sometimes. And then there's a reordering where you get a new understanding of what all those things mean, both the chaos and what you thought before. And you come up with something new that's stronger and better. So that's another possibility. And that's kind of what happens with Job, actually. He has a firm foundation, but by the end of the story, everything he knows is just blown completely out of the water. And kind of literally, as God takes him on a tour of the whole cosmos, even to approaching the Leviathan, who is the great chaos beast of creation, you know. And God says, yeah, I don't mess with this guy. You know, he's playing around. That's great. I'm just going to leave him alone. But I take joy in the chaos. And you know, Job is how can this be? What does this mean? And then, you know, it's letting go of the surety in order to allow God to be God. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Okay. Anyway, and there are some folks who think that God is not present in suffering. I just want to name that too. That is a possible answer. Okay, well, whew, heavy hitting to get us started, right? So tonight's theme is maintaining trust in times of crisis. So here we are, just exactly what we've been talking about, of course. And we're going to be looking at Isaiah 50 and Psalm 31, little chunks of each of those, plus some pieces from Lamentations 3. So if you read the material before coming in, you will be familiar with those. And if not, well, you won't. So we'll take a look.
Just the day before.
Okay.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. All right. Well, let's begin with a prayer, and we're going to use St. Patrick's breastplate as our opening prayer, and we're going to do some motions with it. So, if you want to stand up, you can stand up.
Now, do we have to touch the floor without bending our knees?
I certainly hope not. It's not my expectation. So,
Put your hands flat on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So let us pray. Christ above me, Christ below me.
Christ below me. Whoa.
Christ in front of me, Christ behind me, Christ all around me, Christ in the heart of everyone.
Christ the aerobic instructor.
Amen. All right, you may be seated. Okay, so here we go. We've got Isaiah 50 verses 4 through 9. And just as we're coming into it, this comes from about the same section as what we were reading last week. This comes from the period of the exile. So after the destruction of Jerusalem and people were carried off to Babylon, that's where we are here. And this is also, well, don't get ahead of yourself again, David. All right, here we go. So would somebody like to read a little bit for us here? Yeah, just go ahead and read first 3 verses and we'll get somebody else to read the next.
The sovereign Lord has given me his words of wisdom so that I know how to comfort the weary. Morning by morning, he wakens me and opens my understanding to his will. The sovereign Lord has spoken to me, and I have listened. I have not rebelled or turned away. I offered my back to those who beat me, and my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mockery and spitting.
Somebody want to pick it up there?
Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore, I have set my face like a stone, determined to do his will, and I know that I will not be put to shame. He who gives me justice is near. Who will dare to bring charges against me now? Where are my accusers? Let them appear. See, the sovereign Lord is on my side. Who will declare me guilty? All my enemies will be destroyed like old clothes that have been eaten by moths.
All right. Well, that's some interesting stuff. Hi, Tim. Welcome. Quite all right. Glad you're here. I always have that hope. For myself, I'm not worried about you. All right, then we have Psalm 31. There are some similar themes here in verses 9 through 16. So somebody want to read 9, 10, 11? Sue?
Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am in distress. Tears blur my eyes. My body and soul are withering away. I am dying from grief. My years are shortened by sadness. Sin has drained my strength. I am wasting away from within. I am scorned by all my enemies and despised by my neighbors. Even my friends are afraid to come near me. When they see me on the street, they run the other way.
Okay, somebody want to pick it up there and just do the second column? Not everybody at once.
I am ignored as if I were dead, as if I were a broken pot. I have heard the many rumors about me, and I am surrounded by terror. My enemies conspire against me, plotting to take my life. But I am trusting you, O Lord, saying, you are my God. My future is in your hands. Rescue me from those who hunt me down relentlessly. Let your favor shine on your servant in your unfailing love.
All right, thank you very much. What do you notice in those two? Anything just pop out?
There's a lot of lamentation going on there.
There is. There is. Definitely. All right. And speaking of lamentation,
Hey, look at that.
so in the reading, the author has 3 sections from chapter 3 of Lamentation. So let me start us off here, referring to God. He has walled me in, and I cannot escape. He has bound me in heavy chains. And though I cry and shout, he has shut out my prayers. He has blocked my way with a high stone wall. He has made my road crooked. And then jumping ahead to 21. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. And I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. And one more chunk of lamentation. Anybody else want to read?
I can do it.
Oh, okay. I got Bertha. Bertha do the left column, and then Desta can do the right.
The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. So it is good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. And it is good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. Let them sit alone in silence beneath the Lord.
Let them lie face down in the dust, for there may be hope at last. Let them turn the other cheek to those who strike them and accept the insults of their enemies. For no one is abandoned by the Lord forever.
Okay. So yeah, lots of lamenting here and lots of wrestling with what all this suffering means and how to get through it. So, okay. Yeah. All right. So we're going to come back to these in just a little bit. So we're going to dig in and explore these. So the first section in the reading was responses to disaster. Did you get a chance to read this stuff?
Yes, I skipped it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So if we're going to summarize it, we've got this text from Isaiah 50 and from the Psalm, of course, and the Lamentations. So these are all coming out of situations of tragedy, of despair. We can find that there are various attempts in the Bible to make sense out of suffering, and there's more than one answer in the Bible about what is happening in the midst of suffering. All of the attempts try to hold in common the belief that God is still in charge, even while that oppression is going on. And so there's a wrestling that has to go on to figure out what that means. But that belief that God is still in charge gives some comfort in the midst of all of that. So what were your reactions in reading this, or what questions did you have in the reading?
So when it says lamentations lays the destruction of the word, it points to the problem of undeserved suffering, making it itself an apt liturgy for believers throughout the time for that part of the last paragraph. What is that referring to?
So the book of Lamentation is written about the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and basically blaming God for it. Obviously, as we read those three passages from there, that's not all there is to it. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of movement spiritually, emotionally through the book of Lamentation. But some of it is, why did you do this to us? And then it kind of moves on to these passages of trust and hope in chapter 3.
Because it seemed to match up in terms of what we were listening to.
Right. Yeah. So if you read like the first chapter, it's just this outpouring of grief about the destruction and descriptions of the destruction, and it's just heartbreaking. And there's kind of a sense that, all right, so we're not perfect, but we didn't deserve this, and then it goes on, and so yeah, that's kind of what's going on. Any other reactions or questions?
That last sentence in the paragraph above the quote. That every reflection asserts in some way that God participated in the nation's destruction just as much as this kind of
Yeah. So that's a big thing, right? Destroyed everything on earth, and except for, a handful of living beings. And we put that as the imagery for our nursery wall, right? You always have the ark in the nursery for some reason, with the rainbow, and it's like,
Well, rainbow's the best part.
yeah, it's like,
Okay, I've done this once, we're not this again.
yeah, but geez, every living thing that wasn't on that boat,
Well, you gotta look at it this way.
right?
He made it all.
Yeah,
He cannot make it.
yeah.
It's his prerogative.
If God is God, then God gets to choose, right? But, and if God decides to unmake a nation, God can unmake a nation. So there's that part of it. And that we get into that in some of that text there, lie down with your face in the dust and see what the Lord's going to do next, which kind of sounds like it's hopeful, but sort of maybe not. It's like duck and cover and see what the Lord's going to do next. Yeah. I have a few thoughts on it that I'm going to hold on to, I think. But
you've always said God is good, and then there are all of these instances of suffering and destruction, and it's so hard to reconcile good God versus this, and it goes along with the whole thing of, okay, well, what is prophesied, and therefore they should have turned and repented, and it happened, but then there's the story where Jesus talks about, well, these people ain't worse than those, but these certain things happen, and so why is it in some instances when bad things happen, God willed it to happen as punishment, and other instances it didn't. And then if you think about Job, or you take it further, maybe God didn't cause these things to happen, but it couldn't happen without allowing it to happen. And so then how do you reconcile torture and the Holocaust and all of these things? Aren't there some things that are so terrible that we should intervene and stop them? Which takes you down a whole other rabbit hole of if he intervenes every time a human makes a bad decision to harm another human, there's free will. But so I have a hard time with this whole thing.
you have just summarized it perfectly. That is exactly the problem with suffering. No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a very fluid subject, and all of that you said is in the scripture. All of those points of view are represented in the scriptures. That God did it, that God allowed it, that God was absent from it, and none of those is a good answer. Right? So, and all of those are good answers. Right?
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, let's dig a little further and see what happens. Okay, so this is designed as small group work, but I think maybe we're a small enough group we are one. So we'll just maybe limit the amount of time that we take on this. Sure, we will. And okay, so here are a couple of questions about the Lamentations part. How do these texts affirm that God allows suffering and yet will save people eventually?
I think it's because it's happened before.
Okay, say a little more.
So it happened when they were in Egypt,
Mhm.
and he let them suffer in Egypt, but then he took them out of Egypt. they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years or however many long time, but he still gave them the promised land. Whatever his promises are, he fulfills those.
Mhm.
But I
Okay.
think so often we put our human thoughts and human expectations, and it may not be God's way. We
Yeah.
kind of like want to put them in a can and say, you're going to do this for me.
Right. God, our lucky rabbit's foot. Right?
Yeah. And it's not like that.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. Any other thoughts?
I'll go with what Dexter said, honestly, because I don't see a whole lot in there that gives us the hope. It's kind of like, this is what's happening, this house can go down, all kind of thing. And to me, it says you got to trust in God. Basically, said, because we've been through it before, and we know He's not just gonna, we have to know inwardly, He's not abandoning us.
Yeah. So it kind of calls back one of the previous lessons that we did on taking the long view, right?
All right, there you go. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that thrown in, which doesn't necessarily satisfy in the short term. It's kind of tough sometimes when you're right in the midst of it. But seeing eventually, yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Where's God in the midst of the Ukraine war?
I spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I think when things like wars and what's going on in Ukraine now happens, you have to look at what other people are doing in response to it. So other people are showing out more love and all these great things, and other people are seeing it, and so it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it.
Like he's working through the people.
Yeah, so you might think everything is completely bad, and it is bad, but there are good things happening because of that. That if you're just focused on bad things, you're gonna miss all of this good stuff that's happening.
Yeah. So
There is an awful lot of good happening.
yeah. Well, so Mr. Rogers talked about
Look for
this,
the
right?
helpers.
Look for the helpers. Watch for the helpers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look at Poland. Poland is doing great stuff, right? And the courage of the Ukrainian people in response to all of this and helping each other, and the nations rallying around them. So I mean, there is goodness happening, but it's sad that it has to. Well, yeah, and we have to have the disaster at all. It's basically the decision of one guy that's doing all this.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. Well, how would this idea of God bringing salvation eventually be comforting to the people who first heard it? So people in exile, how might that be comforting to them?
Sticking to, maybe that would be a source of comfort if you can just continue to have that belief that God will in fact answer your prayers.
Good. Having hope, faith, God will answer prayers. Trust in God. Yep.
And I think part of it is that there is usually a way out. There is usually something that helps you through whatever it is you have to endure. That hope somehow, you don't know, you can't explain it, but somehow you get through it.
Yeah. And maybe for those folks in exile, they might think, well, if not me, then my kids will see it, or my children's children, or the next generations will see the salvation of the Lord, even if I don't. There might be some comfort in that. Is it comforting to you? And why or why not?
I think I heard something wrong. I'm not convinced it would be comforting for me in that situation.
Okay. Yeah.
And watching the conversation, right? I'm always surprised at the right person, though. Cities are just besieged and they're still mixed up in versus services. I don't know that would be.
Yeah. Mhm.
So are most people in Ukraine Christian?
I don't know positively, but I would say that the majority religion of those who hold religion would be Christian, probably Orthodox. Them Orthodox, they're tough. They're hardcore. So yeah.
Wow.
Anybody else want to take a stab there?
More difficult in today's society because there's so much instant gratification and everybody's so used to having answers or food, just fast food or just everything's so.
Yeah. So like you got something in.
Factors into it.
If I pray for something and it doesn't happen right now in the way that I want it, I'm not figure out.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a part of it. Everybody's just so tuned to having things right there.
Right now. Yeah. I think you're right. Wait, you got something in the microwave. It's like, come on, I don't have all minute.
The microwaves are too slow.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Okay.
I like this part about though I fall and cry, God shuts out my prayer.
Oh.
But then later on, I mean, there used to be a country song about unanswered prayers, and it used to really irk my dad. And he's like, no prayers are unanswered. God hears everybody's prayer, and He's answered it in His own way, in His own time. So every prayer is answered. It just might not be the way you want it to be answered.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it goes on to talk about waiting quietly and things like that. So I've definitely been in that situation before where, are so upset about something, you keep praying about it, and you almost feel like you're being shut out because nothing is happening. And it's worse or the same thing. And you really, really have to
Yeah.
very patient.
I think it was.
Honestly, what Lindsay said, God answers prayers in His own way, in His own time. And that's what I'm constantly praying for clarity. I want to know right now, I have to wait. Why do I have to wait? How long do I got to wait? And what's the problem? Some I did, some not good for me, and that's not the way God works.
Yeah.
It would be nice to know.
Yeah.
It's easier, it's always easier to, It's like when you call, they say, you know, you put you on hold and you don't know how long it's gonna be versus they say you were sixth in line, your estimated wait time is at least 10.
Yeah,
You get something, you're okay, do this, I'll call back.
yeah,
God, it'd be nice if we had some kind of way just to tell us, like, okay, we're gonna get to that. There's a few things you gotta go through, some things gotta happen with other people in your life. And typically in retrospect, that's what I find the answer was, that's what I had to wait.
yeah,
Makes you want to go, okay, well, I know, I handled it a little better.
yeah. Yeah.
Lindsay said, you gotta be really patient.
And sometimes it's a matter of, it takes time for you to change in order to be able to receive the answer.
I don't want to change.
I understand. I really do. I think it was Corrie ten Boom who wrote about a period in her life where she felt like her prayers were bouncing off the ceiling, coming back down to her. And if I remember the story correctly, it came around to her needing to forgive one of her captors who was still alive and in prison. And she ended up going to visit him. I mean, it took a while before she was ready to do that. But that became the path to her prayers being answered. Right? So, yeah, yeah. Boy, that is hard stuff. All right, well, how about the Psalm and the Isaiah passage? Just got 1, 2 questions. All right, so, oops. All right, so what's God's role here and what are victims supposed to do according to these passages? And be handy if I could back up all the way to where those were. Let's see if I can. Probably can't.
I think part of it is that you need to have hope in God.
Mm-hmm.
Hope in God, pray to God.
Yeah. So with the Isaiah passage, do you remember how it started off? Let me see if I can get there. Okay, there we go. All right, that wasn't too bad. The sovereign Lord has given me his words of wisdom so I might know how to comfort the weary. Morning by morning, he wakens me and opens my understanding to his will. The sovereign Lord has spoken to me and I have listened. I have not rebelled or turned away. So there's that. And then in the Psalm,
Yeah, he's saying, I'm trusting you.
yeah.
My future's in your hands.
Mhm. So, where were we? So what's God's role then? If we're supposed to trust.
I look at like, God will let her see when he's good and ready.
Okay.
We keep praying. That's what we're supposed to
Yeah,
pray next.
yeah.
Trying to set our
So
minds.
what did,
A source of comfort.
okay, so the Lord is also providing the comfort. Yeah, yeah. So that Isaiah passage starts off, every morning the Lord gives me his word, teaches me so that I'll listen. So part of the praying process is shutting up for a while, listening. It's so hard. It's really hard. So God teaches, God gives the word, God gives strength, hope, somebody
God
said,
gives wisdom.
wisdom. There's also something in there somewhere, wasn't there, about I hear the word from the Lord and then I go out and I teach others to do the same, right? So some of that, being a channel for the word of the Lord. So what would be your natural inclination?
It's all mine.
Yeah. I mean, it might be just what that says, to listen and to teach. It might be to listen and to do nothing. It might be to do stuff and not listen. It might be just to give up. These are all possible responses. And I'm sure there are more than that. Okay, I can tell when that's a personal question. All right, so let's, when we move on to in the reading, there's a whole section on nonviolent resistance and the story about a young man experiencing some pretty degrading racism toward him. And because he had been taught in how to deal non-violently, he was able not to retaliate. So, how does Jesus deal with aggression? Can you think of some stories where he's in that position?
I think,
Yeah, he lost it at the temple, right? With the, yeah. Okay.
I think he posed a question whenever he was questioned, or he gave a parable,
Yeah.
kind of a parallel.
Yeah, so he was very good at turning the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when they asked him, well, how do you have the authority to forgive somebody? And he talks about, well, when he was baptized, was it John the Baptist, a person, or was it the Holy Spirit? And they came back and said, I don't know. And he says, well, neither will I tell you who gave me authority.
Right.
You call that in your face.
He also prayed.
He does. He does. He prepares with prayer on a regular basis. He trains with prayer. Good call. What about the, yeah. So with all of that, he goes before the council, he goes before Pilate, he goes before Herod, he goes before Pilate again, has lots of opportunities to say, oh, by the way, I'm the Son of God, right? He did not do that. Had opportunities to call down armies of angels.
He did not pull rank.
He did not pull rank.
He
Yeah.
could have.
Absolutely could have. Absolutely could have. apparently, yeah.
Well, there have been a few times in my life where someone was causing me distress or consternation, that kind of thing. All of us have had that, right? Actually, could have done something about it. But I realized that there would be no good in that. Not, yeah, I could win the battle or something, but if the individual was causing me distress, wasn't going to learn anything from it, or wasn't going to, if they felt they had to win or something, and it was not a big deal to me to let it go that way, and maybe they pick up on it later, plant the seed that this is not correct behavior. This is the way you want to try and live it out. We know that which goes around comes around. So we reap. So you want to sow these seeds against me? I'll let you do it. I can handle it. But you see what happens in the future. So,
Yeah.
not very often, unfortunately, but a few times.
Okay. Yeah.
Thing I always do when I get very upset with someone or like road rage or something. You told us, well, you always do this in the benediction, I think, but you told us in another Bible study or church or sometime to picture, if you're upset with someone, picture them as a child of God, and then it's very hard to stay angry at that person. And so I always try to do that if somebody cuts me off, I'm driving, and I'm like, child of God, child of God, they might have something else going on I don't know about, and then it goes away, and I don't feel angry anymore. So it really is hugely helpful to me, and Jesus is definitely see everyone child of God. So
Yeah.
sure helps as well.
That is really good. I've learned to do the same thing. I've learned to just let it go. And it's tough. You kind of got to, I do the same thing. Right. You know what? No one's going to be upset by me reacting to that.
Yeah.
I've learned it. So I
It's
say,
very helpful. Very helpful.
so right.
Good.
And then you get your destination, you've forgotten all about it, unlike, receive about these things.
I am so glad to hear that because I'm terrible at that. I try. I know. It's good for me to hear it come back. It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. All right, good. So those are a couple of examples. Any other ways that you can think of that Christians have modeled that nonviolent response?
Well, look at Israel.
What about
In
Israel?
more recent times, they so many times have been bombed or different things come from all the different attacks that they got, that they have, and they do respond often, they do. But there have been many times their response has been very, very measured.
Yeah.
Compared to what they could have done. And I guess by and large, they're not Christians.
There are some Christians there, but
there are some Christians there.
not many in power.
Yeah, but it shows you that, and they have a great love of God. They know they're God's chosen people, and they have some pretty amazing capabilities. Sometimes I still remember what one of them said. I don't know if it was Netanyahu or the other, but there were these attacks from the Palestinians said, we can forgive you for killing our children. We cannot forgive you for causing us to kill your children.
Yeah, I'd want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah,
I understand.
they go with the law.
It's yeah. I mean, it's like what that sounds like to me is an abusive husband saying, "Don't make me hit you." Right? And yeah, I mean, it's a wildly complex situation there, more so than that. But yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, so there has been some evidence there anyway of forbearing.
I think measured responses have to be part. I mean, none of us is Christ. There's not one of us that can go through what he went through and just take it all for the benefit and love of humanity.
Yeah.
We're all going to respond in some way, shape, or form, and it's our struggle to reach atonement is just that. How do we become more Christ-like with this? Preach to us on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, and it's a daily, but people cut it off, or there's other things that happen to us,
Yeah.
and measuring your response. So
Okay.
I struggle. That's right.
Sure. We all do. We all do. Yeah. Yeah, right across there, so you can see it when you're grabbing the wheel.
I also started listening to the Christian radio station.
Okay.
And 92.5 switched like a while back to the Christian station. They used to be regular popular music. And I found that actually helps a lot as well. It's really hard to be mad at somebody when, you're listening to great worship music. You can't really be like sitting in there like cussing or something to yourself when you've got that on the radio.
We turn the radio down. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse
I don't want
me.
you guys to hear this.
Yeah.
No.
Excuse me a second, Lord. I'll be right back. Yeah. All right. Any other Christians that you can think of who have modeled the example of nonviolence? Martin Luther King. It's a good one. Yep. All right. Probably a few others. I hope there are a few others.
Well, one of the biggies, Martin Luther King.
What we just said. Yeah.
What about the Luther or the original Reform
Oh, the Reformation. Yeah.
Reformations?
Yeah. There was a lot of violence during the Reformation.
So,
Actually, yeah. I'm sure there were some incidents of nonviolent resistance in the Reformation.
Oftentimes, the peaceful protests sometimes garner more attention and lead to more upheaval.
Yeah.
Whether it's stuff with the BLM or the whole thing with taking a knee pledge, like all these different things, like
Yeah.
it's interesting, like sometimes taking that that route will garner more attention, if not more violent repercussions. So
Yeah.
that's interesting too. Sometimes taking
Yeah.
the non-violent resistance.
Yeah.
Just because you're doing that doesn't, different people are going to react.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you win.
Sure.
Right. And we're going to get to that in a minute here, actually. So any other models that Christians have used that you're aware of besides the one that Jesus said? Anytime Christians advocate for persecution, anytime Christians throw their lot in with power, anytime Christians so anytime Christians call for division, So like the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, who thought that it was a good idea to separate the races. Not a good plan. Things like that. That's enough of that. Let's go on. That was hard.
We've done most of
There we are. Yeah, it's really tough. Okay, so there's a section that's called Ladder of Courage, Ladder of Trust. It starts off, and in the first paragraph, it says, "It's one thing to reminisce about key moments in the past that demanded courage. It's quite another to assert trust in the midst of uncertain present," as the speaker in Isaiah 50 does. Even in isolation, he affirms that God teaches him, helps him, vindicates him, and stands near him. It could not have seemed so. It could not have seemed so except by faith. So, what are some ways that Christians continue to push for justice and truth in situations where it appears they will not succeed?
I think in personal interactions,
Okay.
I think, we hear all this stuff on the news, we're constantly told this, told that, depending on what news you're going to listen to. You can trust anything anymore. What it comes down to is in our daily lives, we interact with different people of all stripes. Most of us do because of the area we live in. Some parts of the country probably don't. And so if you're good, if you're kind, if you're fair, and equitable in your dealings with other people, I think that's Christ-like. And I think anytime you deal with people in that manner, you are in fact exemplifying what Christ taught us to do.
Okay.
And instilling some confidence in those that may not have the confidence at first, that some people may be uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this remote thing of we're going to do service calls. I've done many different cultures and homes, and sometimes I'm not sure what they expect. I always try to make people feel comfortable, the fact that I respect them and like them for the people they are. And invariably, that always turns out good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's where the boots are on the ground, is where we're going to solve and or promote the good things that we need to do.
Okay. All right.
That's my personal take.
Sure. So in personal interactions. Yeah. How else?
I would say that regardless of what they think will happen, they continue to have kind of piggyback on have dialogue with one another as we're doing now, and talk about the beliefs and everything you stand for. We got a session and we came up with a diversity statement for example. We just have conversations as a group. You're more educated. You have this conversation.
Okay, so continuing to be in relationship, continuing to talk with people of different mind to try to understand, to reach new agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would also say that, as opposed to part of the situations where it appears they will not succeed, well, it's like anything you want to do in life. If you say, oh, this ain't gonna work, well, then it won't.
No.
Sometimes you got to say, I'm gonna go for this. Maybe it won't work this time. Maybe this is just a starting thing. But everything builds upon itself over the course of time, I think. And so I don't ever like to recognize that something may not succeed unless it's so blatantly against God's teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And a bad way to go. But that's usually actions more than anything else. And even those can be overcome if you're pushing good. Good will overcome evil. Just might not do it as quickly as we would like.
Mm-hmm. Dustin?
Teaching. Anywhere from Sunday school, from the elementary to teenagers to adults, all the different forms of teaching.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Anybody else? What are some areas where this might be the case? Some situations where we need to be fighting for justice and truth, but it does not appear like the needle is moving.
Racism.
Well, it's
Great.
probably the Palestinian item that the National Presbytery tries to push, and or like the Belhar Confession and things like that.
I'm not sure. I know the situations you're talking about. So we're talking about the like bringing justice for the Palestinians, and Belhar was about apartheid. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's still, some people they're for it and other people are against it.
Yeah.
So it probably doesn't seem like it's going anywhere.
Well, yeah, certainly the conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis continues. And yeah, that's going to be a tough one to move the needle on, that's for sure. But people continue to keep working at it. Some people are, anyway, I know. We don't hear about as much in the news lately, but there are still people working at it.
I say in that instance, and I agree with this, and honestly, I think they'll be fighting when Christ comes back, I really do. But it's not always a destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
It's what do we do during this conflict? Are we horribly evil and returning evil for evil constantly? Or are we trying to take a defensive stance? Are we trying to de-escalate instead of escalate? And I think that's valuable. I think some of that's valuable. Even if there's no immediate or long-term solution, still there's a lot of things along the way that can be accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
In any consternation or conflict.
Yeah. Logan, you mentioned racism. That's certainly one. Anything you wanted to flesh out about that?
Well, the whole, even within our own country, used towards African Americans. Just all the Black Lives Matter, the whole, sure,
Yeah.
exactly. But then, that also push out other outside the country too.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So racism, white supremacy. So coming to deeper understanding of what the situations actually are, what people's experiences are on both sides of that divide. It doesn't seem like the needle is moving very fast, to be sure, but maybe it's moving a little bit. We hope. The arc is long, but it bends toward justice. Okay. Anything else come to mind? Dave, it's enough. It's enough. All right. Well, let's see if we can process a little bit of this. So you have an opportunity here now for a little bit of personal reflection. This would be if you want to write something down. We got some paper up here, or use the back of your sheets. So imagine you're in a situation like those who were struggling for civil rights in the 1960s. This is an interesting way to phrase this question. This is the way the author phrased the question. I don't know if I would have phrased it this way, but what do you need to remember in situations where society may, what do you need to remember in situations where society may be totally against the Christian community?
God is still in control, and Jesus is still our Savior.
There you go. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a minute or two to ponder that and whatever else might come up. Oops. Just ponder for a minute.
Oh, ponder.
Just ponder for a minute. We'll get to the expounding. Got to give the introverts a chance to process stuff.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Anybody need more time? Anything anybody wants to share out of that?
A couple things I said. God is in control, maintain faith and trust in the Lord. Remember the good in the world and feed off of the positivity. And I was just about to write. It's a good chance for us as Christians to practice in those instances where society may be against the views. It's a good chance for us to practice what God teaches us to do, whether it's just to spread the word of the gospel, or to pray with each other, or to have a Christian mindset, or just all of the things that it would be a great chance to put into action some of those things. So,
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Right.
I think there are multiple communities that think they're the Christian. So there's that too.
Yeah. That was part of what I was thinking about, that there are a lot of different ways of expressing the Christian community. So, and sometimes there are segments that are the part of the problem, and sometimes they're part of the solution. And I suspect that it goes you know, it's a fairly fluid thing, but yeah, that's part of it too. Bearing witness to our siblings in faith. And they not?
I think there's some,
Oh, hold on a second, Desta. Susan.
sorry.
Or you think, yeah, I can't make a difference. The problem is so much bigger than I am. What can I do next? Standing up for what you believe in. Actually.
So having the courage of your convictions. Okay. Yeah, Desta?
I think that in the 60s and even today, there's still a lot of turmoil about gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if, and you're talking about the fluidity of the different, you know, the Christian community, because the Christian communities have different thoughts on those things too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. All right, so these were the topics that we have discussed. So these might be some of the things that, as Logan said, if we get into that situation where we feel the pressure of society coming against us, that we remember maybe these things as practices, as ways of bearing witness to our faith in voicing gratitude, taking the long view, choosing well, accepting responsibility, welcoming the future, maintaining trust. We're way over time again. I was going to ask for what's something that you'll remember out of all of that. But I think I'll just let that hang with you, and you can carry that question out with you. What will you remember about these practices? And so let's wrap up here. Next week's lesson is no lesson. We're done. That's it. We've learned all there is to learn. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for your participation in the class. It's been fun. I really appreciate your thoughtful input and consistency in showing up. So thank you for that. So for our closing prayer, let's do the St. Patrick again. I can't think of a better way. So, Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ in front of me, Christ behind me, Christ all around me, Christ in the heart of everyone. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, beloved.
Just have a good week.
We'll do it again sometime.
Night, everyone. And thank you, David. Thank you very much.